What do you do when the man who once loved you turns your life into a nightmare? Sky had given up everything for Chad, the love of her life, or so she thought. But as his career flourished, her world became smaller, her voice silenced, her freedom stolen. What started as love turned into control. What started as devotion became a prison. Trapped in a life of fear, she endured it all until one night she saw the truth. Chad would never stop, and for the first time in years, she made a choice. To fight back. Don't miss how Sky reclaims her power. Subscribe now and follow her journey to justice. I'm Sky, and 10 years ago, I was a bright-eyed tour guide with dreams of exploring the world. Then I met Chad. Chad was charming, successful, and swept me off my feet. We married quickly, and for a brief, beautiful moment, I thought I had it all. Then came the job offer that changed everything. Tiff, I've been offered a position with an amazing law firm, Chad said one night over dinner. That's great, honey. Where is it? It's in another city. We'd have to move. My heart sank. I loved my job, but I loved Chad more. What about my work? His face hardened. Come on, Tiff. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You can find work anywhere. I hesitated, but his excitement was contagious. You're right, we'll make it work. We packed up and moved to a big house in a new city. At first, it felt like an adventure until the boxes were unpacked, and with them, a version of Chad I had never seen before. The house is a mess, he snapped one evening, his eyes scanning the half-unpacked living room. I'm working on it, I said, gesturing toward the remaining boxes. Work faster. I can't live like this. I blinked, startled by his tone. He was stressed, I told myself. A new job, a big move he just needed time to adjust. Weeks passed. I searched for work, desperate to regain a piece of my old life. Maybe I should look for a tour guide position here, I suggested over dinner. Chad laughed. Don't be ridiculous. You need to focus on the house. It's still not up to par. I frowned. But I want to work, Chad. I miss it. He stood abruptly, looming over me. I'm the one working, Sky. Your job is here, making sure everything is perfect for me. Got it? Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I forced a nod. This wasn't the man I married, but I told myself we'd figure it out. I had no idea I was stepping into a nightmare that would last for years. As the days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months, I found myself trapped in an endless cycle of housework and walking on eggshells. Chad's temper grew shorter, his demands steeper. One day, exhausted and desperate, I suggested hiring a housekeeper. Chad's face turned red. Are you kidding me? You want to waste my hard-earned money on something you should be doing? This is your job, Sky. If you can't handle it, maybe you're not cut out to be my wife. His words sliced through me, but I swallowed the hurt. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll try harder. And try harder I did. I threw myself into being the perfect wife, hoping, praying it would bring back the man I once loved. But the more I gave, the more Chad took. As his career soared, our marriage plummeted. I watched from the shadows as he became a celebrated lawyer. Meanwhile, I faded into the background, nothing more than a ghost in my own home. As the years passed, I became a master of social media management, running Chad's accounts from behind the scenes. It was ironic. I crafted the image of a successful, happy couple while living a lie. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Chad stormed in, slamming the door. Rough day? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Shut up and get my food ready, he snapped. I quickly plated the meal I'd spent hours preparing. Chad took one bite and spat it out. This is disgusting. Can't you do anything right? Before I could respond, he swept the plate off the table. It shattered on the floor, food splattering everywhere. Clean it up, he growled, standing over me. As I knelt to pick up the broken pieces, tears stung my eyes, but I didn't dare let them fall. This had become our new normal. The next day, determined to do better, I spent hours cooking Chad's favorite dish. As I set the table, I realized with horror that I'd forgotten the bread. Chad walked in, loosening his tie. Where's my food? Coming right up, I said, hurrying to serve the soup. He sat down, looked at the table, and exploded. Where's the bread? Are you really this incompetent? In one swift motion, he knocked the bowl off the table. Hot soup splashed across my leg, and I couldn't hold back a scream of pain. God, you're so stupid, Chad muttered, leaving me alone with the mess and my burning skin. As I cleaned, sobbing quietly, a thought hit me like a thunderbolt. How did I let it get this bad? When did I become the shell of a person? The next morning, I woke up with a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't live like this anymore. Chad, I said as he was about to leave for work, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. He turned slowly, a cruel smile spreading across his face. A divorce? You? He laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Listen carefully, Sky. If you leave me, I'll destroy you. You'll have nothing. No money, no reputation, nothing. You'll end up on the streets with the other worthless people. My breath caught in my throat. I'd seen the homeless in our city, their desperate faces haunting me. Could that really be my fate? Face it, Chad continued. You're nothing without me. Remember that. As he left, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor. He was right. I had no money of my own, no career, nothing. But I also knew I couldn't keep living like this. That day marked a turning point. I might not have had the courage to leave yet, but I started planning. I began secretly recording our interactions, saving abusive texts, and documenting everything. If I was going to escape, I needed proof. As I continued to document Chad's abuse, his career reached new heights. He won a high-profile case and decided to celebrate at home with colleagues and friends. You'll prepare everything, he ordered, and don't even think about ordering in. I want it all homemade. For days, I worked tirelessly. I cleaned every inch of our house, prepared an array of dishes, and made sure everything was perfect. The night of the party arrived, and I was exhausted but ready. Chad came home early carrying a bottle of wine. Here, he said, pouring me a glass. You look like you could use this. I was surprised by his gesture, but accepted gratefully. The wine tasted odd, but I chalked it up to my fatigue. Chad barely touched his glass. Go change, he said. Guests will be here soon. I headed upstairs, suddenly feeling dizzy. By the time I reached our bedroom, the room was spinning. I collapsed onto the bed, consciousness fading fast. When I woke up, sunlight streamed through the windows, too bright, too harsh. My head throbbed, my body heavy with exhaustion. Confused, I forced myself downstairs, the lingering haze of sleep still clouding my mind. Beverly, Chad's mother, stood in the kitchen, her face twisted with disgust. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence, she sneered. You should be ashamed of yourself. I blinked, still disoriented. What? What happened? What happened? Beverly's voice sharpened like a blade. You got drunk and embarrassed my son in front of all his colleagues. That's what happened. He had to call me to entertain them because his wife was passed out upstairs. The words sent a cold wave of nausea through me. That wasn't possible. I had only had one glass of wine. No, that's not— Oh, save it, she snapped, cutting me off. I always knew you weren't good enough for my Chad. Now everyone knows what a mess you are. Her words blurred into the background as fragments of memory surfaced. Wine that had tasted off, Chad barely touching his drink, the sudden dizziness that had pulled me under. He drugged me. The realization hit like a truck. After Beverly left, I sat at the kitchen table, my pulse hammering in my ears. Chad wasn't just cruel, he was calculated. He was dismantling my reputation piece by piece. If I tried to leave now, who would believe me? That day, I stopped second-guessing myself. I bought a new phone and hid it carefully. I started recording everything Chad's drunken rants, his 3 km demands, every insult, every threat. One night stood out more than the rest. My birthday. Some foolish part of me had still hoped. Maybe, just maybe, Chad would remember. Maybe, for one night, he would be the man I had once loved. I made dinner, set the table, waited. When Chad finally stumbled in, reeking of alcohol, I hit record. "What's all this?" he slurred, his bleary eyes scanning the neatly arranged dishes. I swallowed hard. It's It's my birthday, Chad. I made dinner. He laughed, a sharp, cruel bark of amusement. Your birthday? Who cares? Look at you, you fat cow. You don't deserve a celebration. The words landed like blows, but I stayed still, my hidden phone capturing every moment. He sneered, swiping an arm across the table. Plates shattered. Food splattered across the floor I had scrubbed meticulously just hours before. And this, he gestured at the mess, this is slop. You call yourself a wife? Can't even cook a decent meal. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I just let the camera roll. Then there was the night that sealed everything for me. At 3:30 a.m., Chad yanked me awake, his grip rough, his breath hot with liquor. Get up, he hissed. I sat up, disoriented. What's wrong? I found dust. His eyes were wild, his voice a sharp whisper. The house is filthy. Clean it. All of it. Now! For hours, I scrubbed every surface under his relentless gaze. He followed behind me, inspecting my work, pointing out imaginary flaws. My hands ached, my body screamed for rest. But I didn't stop, because somewhere in that hidden spot, my phone was recording, capturing everything. These recordings became my secret weapons, concrete evidence of the abuse I endured. Each file was carefully saved and backed up, a digital archive of my suffering and ultimately my path to freedom. Meanwhile, I heard the whispers when we were out, saw the looks of contempt from Chad's friends. But I kept smiling, playing the role of the perfect wife while secretly fighting for my freedom. Our wedding anniversary was approaching. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped things might improve, but I should have known better. The night of our anniversary, Chad came home in high spirits. I booked us a table at the best restaurant in town, he announced. Let's celebrate. I was wary, but agreed. Before we left, Chad handed me a glass of lemonade. I made it myself, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Alarm bells rang in my head. I pretended to drink, but when Chad stepped out to make a call, I quickly poured it into a nearby plant. As we drove to the restaurant, I felt myself getting drowsy. I fought to stay awake, but my eyes were so heavy. The next thing I knew, I was being roughly pulled from the car. Through half-closed eyes, I saw Chad sneering down at me. This is where you belong, he spat, throwing my purse far into the darkness. With the other worthless people. I heard the car door slam, tires screeching as Chad sped away. My heart raced as I took in my surroundings. Trash littered the streets, and shadowy figures lurked in the darkness. The sound of distant gunshots made me flinch. I was alone, dressed up and wearing jewelry, in the most dangerous part of town. Chad's plan was clear. He hoped I'd fall victim to the criminals who called this area home. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to think. I spotted a small convenience store, its flickering neon sign a beacon of hope in this desolate place. I ran towards it, my heels clacking on the cracked pavement. Bursting through the door, I startled the woman behind the counter. Please, I gasped. I need help. Can I use your phone? The woman, her name tag reading Consuela, looked at me with a mix of concern and suspicion. What happened to you, honey? In a rush, I explained my situation. Consuela's eyes widened, and without a word, she locked the store's front door. Can't have any troublemakers coming in, she explained, handing me her cell phone. Make your calls, sweetie. You're safe here. With shaking hands, I dialed my friend Riley's number, silently thanking my good memory. Riley answered on the third ring. Riley, it's Sky. I need help, I said, my voice breaking. Tiff, what's wrong? Where are you? I gave her the store's address, and she gasped. That's the worst neighborhood in the city. What are you doing there? Chad, he left me here. Please, can you come get me? I'm on my way. Don't move. Ned. As I waited, Consuela kept me company, her kindness a stark contrast to the cruelty I'd become accustomed to. Thank you, I said as Riley's car pulled up outside. You may have saved my life tonight. I slipped off the expensive ring Chad had given me years ago. Here, please take this. It's not much, but... Consuela shook her head. Keep it, honey. Use it to start your new life. Tears in my eyes, I hugged her before rushing out to Riley's car. As we drove away, Riley turned to me. Tiff, this has to stop. You need to fight back. How? I asked, feeling defeated. He has all the power, all the connections. Not all of them, Riley said firmly. I have a friend who works in television. It's time to tell your story. The next few days were a whirlwind. Riley's friend, a producer named Jordan, secured me a spot on a popular talk show. Before I knew it, I was stepping onto the brightly lit stage, momentarily blinded by the overhead lights. The host, a warm-faced woman named Angela, greeted me with a kind smile. Sky, thank you for being here, she said. Can you tell us your story? I took a deep breath and began. I laid everything bare, the years of emotional abuse, the manipulation, the incident in the bad neighborhood. As I spoke, I saw the audience's expressions shift, their shock and sympathy undeniable. Why are you coming forward now? Angela asked. Because I can't be silent anymore, I said, my voice steadier than I had ever heard it. There are so many women out there suffering in silence, thinking they're alone. I want them to know they're not. As the show ended, my phone erupted with notifications. My story had struck a nerve, and support poured in from every direction. But amidst the flood of encouragement, one message sent a chill down my spine. It was from Chad. You'll regret this, you lying scum. I'll destroy you. My hands trembled as I showed the text to Riley. Don't worry, she said, a fire burning in her eyes. He just made his biggest mistake. We've got him now. As we stepped out of the studio, a realization settled over me. This was only the beginning. The real battle was about to begin, and for the first time in years, I was ready to fight. The days following my TV appearance blurred together in a storm of activity. My phone rang nonstop journalists, lawyers, women's rights advocates. Chad's threats continued, but each one only solidified my determination. Then, one morning, an unfamiliar number appeared on my screen. I hesitated, then answered. Is this Sky? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? My name is Amanda Reeves. I'm a lawyer, and I'd like to help you with your case. I frowned. I appreciate the offer, but I can't afford a lawyer. You misunderstand, Amanda said. My firm wants to take your case pro bono. We've been looking for a way to take down Chad Peterson for years. Your story could be the key. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? As it turned out, Chad had made more enemies than I ever realized. Amanda's firm had represented several clients who had lost cases to him, many under suspicious circumstances. They saw my case as an opportunity to not only help me, but to expose his unethical practices once and for all. The next day, I met Amanda and her team. As I laid out my evidence, the recordings, the text messages, everything I saw the way their expressions changed. This is gold, Amanda murmured, flipping through the files. With this, we can not only win your divorce case, but potentially get Chad disbarred. The divorce proceedings began, and Chad came out swinging. He painted a picture of me as an unstable, alcoholic wife, desperate to ruin his reputation out of spite. Your Honor, Chad's lawyer declared, Mrs. Peterson has a history of erratic behavior and substance abuse. These allegations are nothing more than the desperate actions of a woman trying to extort money from her hard-working husband. I clenched my fists. They thought they could twist the truth, rewrite history to suit their narrative, but they had no idea who they were up against. I watched as Chad's mother, Beverly, took the stand, tearfully recounting instances of my supposed drunken behavior, including the night of Chad's work party. She was a disgrace, Beverly sobbed. My poor son has suffered so much because of her. I felt sick listening to their lies, but Amanda squeezed my hand reassuringly. Don't worry, she whispered. We're just getting started. When it was our turn to present evidence, Amanda was ruthless. She played the recordings of Chad's abuse, showed the threatening text messages, and presented a timeline of his escalating behavior. And now, Amanda said, I'd like to call Riley Thompson to the stand. Riley recounted the night she picked me up from the dangerous neighborhood, her testimony corroborating my story. Objection! Chad's lawyer shouted. This is hearsay! Overruled, the judge said. Continue, Miss Thompson. Next, Amanda called Consuela, the convenience store clerk, to testify. Consuela described my state when I entered her store that night and how she had to lock the door for my safety. Chad's face grew redder with each testimony. I could see him seething, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. The final blow came when Amanda presented a toxicology report. Your Honor, we had Mrs. Peterson's hair tested for long-term drug exposure. The results show traces of sedatives consistent with her account of being drugged by Mr. Peterson. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Chad leapt to his feet, shouting, "She's lying! You can't believe this!" "Mr. Peterson, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt," the judge warned. As the evidence mounted, I saw the change in people's faces. The doubt was replaced by shock and sympathy. Even some of Chad's friends in the gallery looked disgusted. The judge called a recess to review all the evidence. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Chad's eye. For the first time, I saw fear there. The courtroom was packed as we reconvened for the judge's decision. The tension was palpable, and I could feel Chad's glare burning into the back of my head. Judge Harris cleared his throat. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Skye Peterson. A collective gasp filled the room. I sat there stunned as the judge continued. Mr. Chad Peterson is hereby ordered to pay alimony, surrender 50% of all joint property, and provide financial compensation for emotional damages. Furthermore, Mr. Peterson will cover all legal costs associated with this case. Chad exploded. This is outrageous! I'll appeal! You can't do this to me! Mr. Peterson, the judge's voice boomed. I suggest you control yourself. Given the evidence presented, you should consider yourself lucky that criminal charges haven't been filed. As Chad was forcibly calmed by his lawyer, the judge turned to me. Mrs. Peterson, this court is imposing a restraining order against Mr. Peterson. He is not to approach you or contact you through any means. Do you understand? I nodded, tears of relief streaming down my face. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I moved out of the house I had once considered a prison into a small but cozy apartment. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But Chad wasn't done. Despite the restraining order, he found ways to make his presence felt. Mutual acquaintances would relay his threats, and I'd occasionally spot his car driving by my new place. We need to do something, Riley said one evening as we were having coffee. He's not going to stop. I nodded, an idea forming. You're right, and I think I know how to end this once and for all. I still had access to Chad's social media accounts. He'd been too arrogant to change the passwords, probably assuming I wouldn't dare touch them. It was time to use that against him. Over the next few days, I meticulously documented every step of our divorce on Chad's accounts. I shared court transcripts, audio clips, and my own story. The response was overwhelming. The carefully curated image he had built crumbled overnight. His firm, unwilling to be tied to the scandal, demanded his resignation. Clients dropped him without hesitation. When Chad realized what was happening, he lost it. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. "You scum!" he screamed. "I'll kill you for this!" I called the police. They arrived quickly, arresting him for violating the restraining order. His threats had been caught on my phone's voice recorder, undeniable proof of his spiraling downfall. As they led him away, I looked at the man I had once loved. Now, he was nothing more than a shell of himself, broken by his own cruelty and arrogance. In the following months, I heard through the grapevine that Chad had moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career. But his reputation followed him, and he struggled to find work. As for me, I was rebuilding too, but in a completely different way. The publicity from the case led to an opportunity I never expected. A local charity that helped women escape abusive relationships reached out to me. "We'd love for you to work with us," the director said. "Your experience could help so many women." I accepted without hesitation. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose. My pain was no longer just mine to bear, it was something I could use to help others, and in doing so, I was healing myself. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of a room full of women, all survivors like me. As I shared my story, I saw something rekindle in their eyes, hope. "Remember," I told them, "you are stronger than you know. Your story matters, and you are not alone." Looking out at their faces, I realized this was what I had been fighting for all along. Not just my freedom, but the chance to help others find theirs. As the months passed, my work at the charity became more than just a job. It became my calling. I connected with women from all walks of life, each with their own harrowing stories of survival. One day, a young woman named Emily arrived at our center. Her story was painfully familiar: a controlling husband, isolation from friends and family, a deep-seated fear of leaving. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with her, helping her create a safety plan, building up her confidence, reminding her that she could break free. The day she finally left him, the look of relief on her face was one I knew all too well. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "You saved my life." Her words hit me harder than I expected. In helping her, I realized I was continuing to heal myself. As our center's reputation grew, we began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and events. At first, the idea terrified me. Public speaking had never been my strength, and the thought of sharing my story in front of large crowds made my palms sweat. But Riley, ever my rock, encouraged me. "Tiff, your story could help so many people. You've got to do this." My first speaking engagement was at a local university. As I stood at the podium looking out at a sea of faces, I felt something shift inside me, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "My name is Sky," I began, "and this is my story of survival." As I spoke, I could see the impact my words had. Students leaned forward, some wiping away tears, others nodding in understanding or clenching their fists in anger at what I had endured. After the talk, a line of people formed, eager to speak with me. Some shared their own experiences, others those of loved ones. Many simply wanted to offer support. That night, as I lay in bed reflecting on the day, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: certainty. My past, as painful as it was, had become a tool for change. The speaking engagements continued, taking me across the country. I spoke at universities, women's shelters, and even a TEDx event. With every speech, I drew strength from my audience, knowing that my words might be the lifeline someone needed. During this time, I also started writing a book about my journey. The process was grueling, forcing me to relive some of my darkest moments, but it was also cathartic. It allowed me to process my trauma in a new way. The day my book was published was surreal. Seeing my name on the cover, my story laid bare for the world, filled me with a mix of terror and pride. To my amazement, it resonated with people. It climbed the bestseller lists, and soon I found myself doing interviews on national television. During one such interview, the host asked a question that made me pause. "Sky, after everything you've been through, do you have any regrets?" I thought carefully before answering. "I regret the years I lost to fear and abuse, but I don't regret my journey. Every step, every struggle led me to where I am now, helping others find their strength. So no, I wouldn't change a thing." As I continued my work, I realized my story wasn't over. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to grow, to heal, to help others. The scared, silenced woman I once was had become something I never imagined: a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope for those still trapped in the darkness I had escaped. What do you do when the person who once promised you the world becomes the one trying to destroy you? For years, Sky lived in the shadows of Chad's success, her own dreams buried beneath his expectations. She gave, she endured. She lost herself until the night he left her stranded, hoping she'd disappear. That night wasn't just a betrayal, it was a wake-up call. Sky could have given in to fear, but instead, she chose to fight. She gathered the proof, exposed his abuse, and stood before the world to tell her story. Chad, who once controlled every aspect of her life, found himself powerless as the truth unraveled. His reputation, his career, everything he had built on manipulation and cruelty crumbled. But Sky's victory wasn't just about escaping Chad, it was about reclaiming herself. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She turned her pain into purpose, helping other women break free from the same chains that once held her. Now, she stands as a voice for the voiceless, a reminder that no one should ever suffer in silence. So, what do you think? Would you have fought back the way Sky did? or do you think she should have walked away sooner? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
For heaven's sake, Mike, can't you just make a decision? I snapped, my patience wearing thin as I juggled a phone call with my biggest client and my husband's indecisiveness over dinner plans. Mike's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Laura. I just want to make sure everyone's happy. I ended the call and turned to face him, exasperation etched on my face. It's just dinner, not world peace. Pick something. Before Mike could respond, our son Josh trudged into the kitchen, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Hey, Mom, Dad, what's for dinner? Your father hasn't decided yet, I said, shooting Mike a pointed look. Josh shrugged. Whatever's fine. I've got a ton of homework anyway. I felt a pang of guilt. At 16, Josh shouldered more responsibility than most kids his age. How about I whip up some spaghetti? Quick and easy. Sounds great, Mom, Josh said, already heading upstairs. Mike nodded, relief washing over his face. That works for me, too. As I started gathering ingredients, the phone rang again. I glanced at the caller ID and groaned. It's your mother. Mike's eyes widened. Oh, I forgot to tell you, she wants to talk to us about something important. I raised an eyebrow. Important enough to interrupt dinner prep? Maybe we should put her on speaker, Mike suggested timidly. Sighing, I answered the call and hit the speaker button. Hello, Miriam. Laura, dear. Miriam's saccharine voice filled the kitchen. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, I lied, catching Mike's grateful smile. What can we do for you? Well, Miriam began, her tone shifting to one of practiced vulnerability, I've been thinking a lot about my living situation. This big house is just too much for me to manage on my own. I froze, a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew where this was going. Mom, Mike chimed in, are you saying you want to move? Oh, Mikey, Miriam cooed. I knew you'd understand. I was hoping. Well, I was wondering if I could come stay with you and Laura for a while. The wooden spoon I'd been holding clattered to the floor. Mike looked at me, his eyes pleading. Miriam, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, that's quite a big decision. We'd need to discuss it as a family. Of course, dear, Miriam replied, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I wouldn't want to impose. It's just that I'm not getting any younger, and I miss seeing my Mikey and Josh every day. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that she'd never shown much interest in Josh before. Mike, emboldened by his mother's words, spoke up. Mom, why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? We can talk about it then. What a lovely idea, Miriam exclaimed. I'll bring dessert. Laura, dear, I hope you don't mind. Not at all, I managed, shooting Mike a look that clearly said we'd be discussing this later. After ending the call, I turned to Mike. You can't be serious about this. Laura, she's my mother, Mike pleaded. She needs us. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. Mike, your mother has never approved of me. How do you think having her here will affect our family? It'll be fine, Mike insisted, his voice lacking conviction. Maybe it'll give her a chance to see how great you are. I laughed bitterly. After 20 years of marriage, she suddenly decides to give me a chance. Please, Laura, Mike begged. Just think about it. As I turned back to the stove, my mind raced. How had my well-ordered life suddenly spiraled into chaos? I'd always prided myself on being able to handle anything, but the thought of Miriam living under our roof sent shivers down my spine. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would test the very foundations of our family. As I stirred the spaghetti sauce, I couldn't shake the feeling that agreeing to this dinner tomorrow night might be the biggest mistake of my life. I never thought I'd dread coming home, but as I pulled into the driveway, my stomach churned. It had been 3 weeks since Miriam moved in, and our once peaceful house now felt like a war zone. As I stepped inside, Miriam's shrill voice pierced the air. Mikey, dear, where are my reading glasses? I'm not sure, Mom, Mike replied, his voice strained. Did you check the kitchen counter? I took a deep breath and plastered on a smile. Hello, everyone, I'm home. Miriam appeared in the hallway, her eyes narrowing. Oh, Laura, you're later than usual. I had to start dinner without you. I'm sorry, Miriam. Work was hectic today, I explained, trying to keep my tone neutral. She sniffed disapprovingly. Well, a wife should be home to cook for her family. In my day— Mom, please, Mike interrupted, shooting me an apologetic look. Laura works hard for us. I gave him a grateful nod, but Miriam wasn't finished. I'm just saying, Mikey, that a woman's place is wherever she chooses it to be. I cut in, my patience wearing thin. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to change before dinner. As I headed upstairs, I heard Miriam mutter, "No respect for her elders." Honestly, Mikey, I don't know how you put up with it. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to turn around and give her a piece of my mind. Instead, I knocked on Josh's door. "Come in," he called. I found him hunched over his desk, surrounded by textbooks. "Hey, sweetie, how's the studying going?" Josh sighed, rubbing his eyes. "It's okay, Mom. Just a lot of pressure, you know?" I sat on the edge of his bed. "I know, honey, but remember, your mental health is important too. Maybe you should take a break?" "I can't," he said, his voice tight. "Grandma Miriam says I need to study harder if I want to get into a good college." My blood boiled. "Josh, listen to me. You're doing great, and pushing yourself too hard isn't healthy. Grandma Miriam doesn't— Doesn't what, Laura?" Miriam's voice came from the doorway, making us both jump. "Doesn't want the best for her grandson?" I stood up, facing her. "Miriam, we need to talk about this. You can't keep—" "Dinner's ready," Mike called from downstairs, inadvertently diffusing the situation. Miriam smirked. "We'll continue this later, dear. Come along, Josh. You need a good meal to fuel that brilliant mind of yours." As they left, I caught Josh's eye. He looked torn, and my heart ached for him. Dinner was a tense affair. Miriam dominated the conversation, praising Mike's childhood achievements and not so subtly comparing them to Josh's. "You know, Mikey was top of his class in math," she boasted. "Josh, dear, how are your math grades?" Josh squirmed in his seat. "They're okay, Grandma." "Just okay?" Miriam skied. "Well, I'm sure if your mother spent more time at home—" "That's enough," I snapped, slamming my fork down. "Miriam, I've had it with your constant criticism. This is my home, and I won't have you undermining me or pressuring Josh." The table fell silent. Mike looked between us, his face pale. "Laura, Mom, please." "No, Mike," I said, standing up. "It's time we addressed this. Miriam, when you moved in, we agreed you'd respect our parenting decisions, but you've done nothing but criticize and interfere." Miriam's eyes flashed. "Well, someone has to look out for this family's best interests. Clearly, you're too busy with your career to do so." "Mom," Mike exclaimed, finally finding his voice. "That's not fair. Laura's an amazing mother and wife." I felt a surge of affection for Mike, but it was quickly doused by Miriam's next words. "Oh, Mikey," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You've always been too soft. It's clear who wears the pants in this family. I just hope poor Josh doesn't suffer for it." As Josh pushed back from the table and fled upstairs, I realized something had to change. This couldn't go on. But as I looked at Mike's conflicted face, I wondered if he'd ever be strong enough to stand up to his mother. Little did I know this dinner confrontation was just the beginning of a storm that would tear our family apart. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hushed voices downstairs. Creeping to the top of the stairs, I listened, my heart sinking with each word. "Mom, I don't know what to do," Mike whispered. "Laura's been so stressed lately." Miriam's voice dripped with false concern. "Oh, Mikey, I've been thinking, maybe it's time Laura took a step back from her job. For the sake of the family, of course." I gripped the banister, my knuckles turning white. How dare she? "I don't know, Mom," Mike replied, uncertainty clear in his voice. "Laura loves her job." "But does she love it more than her family?" Miriam pressed. "Josh's grades are slipping, and you're always so tense. A wife's place is in the home, Mikey. You know that." I'd heard enough. Storming down the stairs, I confronted them in the kitchen. "Is that what you really think, Miriam, that I should give up my career?" Mike jumped, spilling his coffee. "Laura, we were just talking about me behind my back," I finished for him. "I heard everything." Miriam had the audacity to look offended. "Laura, dear, we're just concerned about the family's well-being." "No," I snapped. "You're concerned about controlling everyone's lives. This ends now." Just then, Josh trudged into the kitchen, dark circles under his eyes. "What's going on?" "Nothing, sweetie," I said, trying to soften my tone. "How did you sleep?" "Not great," he mumbled. "I was up late studying for my calculus test." Miriam pounced on the opportunity. "See, if you were home more, Laura, you could help Josh with his studies." "That's it," I exploded. "Miriam, I want you out of this house." Today. The kitchen fell silent. Mike looked between us, panic in his eyes. Laura, please. Mom didn't mean... Oh, I meant every word, Miriam interrupted, her mask of politeness finally slipping. Someone needs to look out for this family's best interests, and clearly it's not you, Laura. Josh's eyes widened. Grandma, that's not fair. Mom works hard for us. Stay out of this, Josh, Mike said, his voice strained. Laura, can we talk about this privately? I shook my head, tears threatening to spill. No, Mike. I'm done talking. Either Miriam leaves or I do. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mike looked torn, his gaze darting between his mother and me. Mikey, Miriam said softly, you can't let her do this. I'm your mother. I held my breath, waiting for Mike to stand up for our family, for me. But as the seconds ticked by, his silence spoke volumes. I see, I whispered, my heart breaking. Josh, go pack a bag. We're leaving. What? Josh exclaimed. Mom? No. Mike finally found his voice. Laura, please, we can work this out. But I was already heading upstairs, Josh reluctantly following. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, my mind raced. Where would we go? What would this mean for our family? Miriam's voice carried up the stairs. Mikey, you can't let them leave. What about my grandson? That was the last straw. I marched back downstairs, suitcase in hand. Your grandson? Josh is my son, Miriam, and I won't let you poison him with your outdated sexist views. Mike stepped between us. Laura, Mom, please. Can't we talk about this calmly? There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice ice cold. You've made your choice, Mike. You chose your mother over your wife and son. As Josh and I headed for the door, Miriam called out, You'll regret this, Laura. You're tearing this family apart. I turned back, meeting her gaze. No, Miriam. You did that the moment you moved in. With that, Josh and I walked out, leaving behind a stunned Mike and a fuming Miriam. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Mike in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway looking lost. Mom, Josh said quietly, what happens now? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, fighting back tears. I don't know, honey, but we'll figure it out together. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would test every ounce of my strength and resolve. 3 days after our dramatic exit, I found myself pacing the floor of Jane's guest room. My best friend had graciously offered us a place to stay while I figured out our next move. Laura, sit down before you wear a hole in my carpet, Jane said, handing me a steaming mug of coffee. I sank onto the bed, my hands shaking. I'm sorry, Jane. I can't believe this is happening. She sat beside me, her lawyer face on. Have you heard from Mike? He's called 12 times, I sighed. I haven't answered. Maybe you should, Jane suggested gently, at least to discuss Josh's situation. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Mike's face flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Laura? Mike's voice was strained. Please, can we talk? I took a deep breath. Fine. Talk. Mom's gone too far this time, he said. I've asked her to leave. My heart skipped a beat. You have? Yes, he replied. I realize now how much damage she's caused. Please, come home. We can work this out. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. But then I remembered all the times Mike had failed to stand up for me, for us. I don't know, Mike, I said cautiously. A lot has happened. I know, he pleaded. But I love you, Laura. We can fix this. Before I could respond, I heard Miriam's voice in the background. Mikey? Who are you talking to? My blood ran cold. Mike, is your mother still there? His hesitation was all the answer I needed. You lied to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Laura, wait. I hung up, my hands trembling with rage. Jane looked at me, concern etched on her face. What happened? I relayed the conversation, my anger building with each word. He lied, Jane. He said Miriam was gone, but she's still there. Jane's expression hardened. Laura, I think it's time we discussed your options, legally speaking. As she outlined potential scenarios, divorce, custody arrangements, property division, my mind whirled. Was this really the end of my marriage? A soft knock interrupted us. Josh peeked in, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, can I talk to you? Jane excused herself, leaving us alone. Josh sat beside me, looking more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years. Mom, I heard you talking to Dad, he said quietly. Are you guys getting divorced? My heart broke. Oh, honey, I don't know yet. Your dad and I have a lot to work through. Josh nodded, then surprised me with his next words. I think maybe you should. What? I gasped. Ever since Grandma moved in, everything's been awful, he continued. Dad never stands up for us, and you're always so sad, Mom. I hate seeing you like this. Tears welled in my eyes as I pulled him into a hug. I'm so sorry, Josh. I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of this. As we held each other, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Miriam. Laura, this childish behavior needs to stop. You're hurting Mikey and destroying this family. If you truly love your son, you'll come home and be the wife and mother you're supposed to be. Rage boiled inside me. How dare she? After everything she'd done, she still had the audacity to lecture me? In that moment, something snapped. I realized I was done being the peacekeeper, done sacrificing my happiness for a family that didn't appreciate me. I looked at Josh, seeing the strength and maturity in his eyes. You're right, honey. Things can't go on like this. Taking a deep breath, I made a decision that would change our lives forever. It's time to end this, once and for all. As I stood up, determination coursing through me, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Miriam had no idea what she was in for. This time, I wouldn't back down. This time, I would fight for myself, for Josh, and for the life we deserved. Little did Miriam know, she had just awakened a force she couldn't reckon with. The gloves were off, and I was ready for war. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Jane had helped me draft a plan of action, and I was ready to reclaim my life. But first, I needed to face Mike and Miriam one last time. As Josh and I pulled into our driveway, my resolve wavered. This house held so many memories, both good and bad. Taking a deep breath, I turned to my son. You don't have to come in if you don't want to, I said softly. Josh shook his head. No, Mom, I'm with you. His words gave me strength. We walked to the front door, and I used my key for what I knew would be the last time. The moment we stepped inside, Miriam's voice rang out. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. Mike appeared from the living room, his face a mixture of relief and anxiety. Laura, Josh, thank God you're home. We're not staying, I said firmly. We're here to collect our things. Miriam scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. This tantrum has gone on long enough. I ignored her, focusing on Mike. I've made my decision, Mike. I want a divorce. The color drained from his face. Laura, please, we can work this out. Can we? I challenged, because from where I'm standing, nothing's changed. Your mother's still here, still controlling our lives. Miriam stepped between us. Now see here, young lady, you can't just throw away 20 years of marriage because you're feeling a little unappreciated. Something inside me snapped. A little unappreciated? You've done nothing but undermine and belittle me since the day you moved in. And you, I turned to Mike, you've let her do it, every single time. Mike reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Laura, I love you. Please don't do this. If you loved me, I said, my voice breaking, you would have stood up for me, for us. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jane. Emergency at the office. Need you ASAP. I looked at Mike and Miriam, suddenly realizing how small they seemed, how insignificant their drama was compared to the life I'd built for myself. I have to go, I said. Work emergency. Josh, can you start packing your things? Miriam's eyes flashed. Work? You're choosing work over your family? I always knew you were selfish, but that's enough. To everyone's surprise, it was Josh who spoke up. Grandma, you don't get to talk to Mom like that, not anymore. Pride swelled in my chest as Josh stood tall, facing down his grandmother. Mike looked between us, confusion and hurt etched on his face. Josh, buddy, what are you saying? He asked. I'm saying I'm going with Mom, Josh replied. I'm tired of the fighting, of walking on eggshells in my own home. Mom's the only one who's ever put me first. Miriam gasped dramatically. Mikey, are you going to let them leave? They're tearing this family apart. As Mike hesitated, torn between his mother and his family, my phone buzzed again. Jane's message flashed on the screen. Laura, it's about the house. You need to see this now. A chill ran down my spine. What could be so urgent? I looked at Mike, seeing the conflict in his eyes. For a moment, I almost wavered, but then I remembered all the times he'd chosen his mother over me, over our family. Josh, change of plans. We need to go to Aunt Jane's office right away, I said, my voice steady. Mike, we'll be back for our things later. Have them ready. As we walked out the door, I heard Miriam's shrill voice. Mikey, do something! But Mike remained silent, and that silence spoke volumes. In the car, Josh looked at me, worry creasing his brow. Mom, what's going on? I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. I don't know, honey, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. As we drove towards Jane's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change dramatically. Little did I know, the bombshell waiting for us would alter the course of our future forever. Jane's office was a flurry of activity when Josh and I arrived. She ushered us into her private room, her face grim. "Laura, I'm glad you're here," she said, closing the door. "We've uncovered something troubling." My heart raced. "What is it, Jane?" She pulled out a thick file. "I've been looking into your financials, preparing for the divorce proceedings. Laura, there are some significant discrepancies." As Jane explained, my world tilted on its axis. Apparently, large sums of money had been systematically withdrawn from our joint accounts over the past year. Money I knew nothing about. "How much?" I whispered, dreading the answer. Jane's voice was soft but firm. "Nearly $500,000, Laura." The room spun. I gripped the edge of her desk, trying to steady myself. That's impossible. I would have noticed." "Mom?" Josh's voice sounded far away. "What does this mean?" I turned to my son, seeing the fear in his eyes. "I don't know, honey, but we'll figure it out." Jane continued, her lawyer mode in full swing. "There's more. The withdrawals coincide with Miriam's move-in date, and they've been transferred to an offshore account." The pieces started falling into place. Miriam's sudden interest in living with us, her constant undermining, her attempts to drive a wedge between Mike and me. It had all been a calculated plan. "She's been stealing from us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And Mike, he must have known." Josh stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. "How could Dad do this to us?" I pulled him into a hug, my mind racing. "I don't know, sweetie, but we're going to find out." Just then, my phone buzzed, a text from Mike. "On our way to Uncle Bob's funeral. Why aren't you answering my calls? We need to talk." A cold determination settled over me. This was my chance. "Jane," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "what are my options?" She leaned forward, all business. "We can file for an emergency injunction to freeze the accounts, and with this evidence, we have a strong case for divorce on grounds of financial infidelity." I nodded. A plan forming. "Do it, and I need one more thing." 20 minutes later, Josh and I were back home. Mike and Miriam would be gone for hours, giving us the time we needed. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Josh asked as we packed our essentials. I paused, looking around the home we'd built together. "No, honey, but I'm sure we can't stay here anymore." As we worked, I drafted a text to Mike. "I know about the money. Don't bother coming home. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. With a deep breath, I pressed send. Moments later, my phone exploded with calls and texts from Mike. I ignored them all. As Josh and I loaded the last of our things into the car, I took one final look at the house. So many memories, good and bad. But it wasn't home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. "Ready?" I asked Josh. He nodded, a mix of sadness and determination in his eyes. "Ready, Mom." We drove away, leaving behind the life we'd known. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Miriam and Mike had underestimated me. They thought I was weak, that I'd roll over and accept their betrayal. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As we pulled into the driveway of our new apartment, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Miriam. "You ungrateful witch! How dare you accuse us of stealing? You'll regret this, Laura. Mark my words." I smiled grimly, feeling a strange sense of calm. The battle lines were drawn. Miriam wanted a war? Fine, she was about to find out just how formidable an opponent I could be. Little did she know I had one more ace up my sleeve. And when I played it, their whole world would come crashing down. The morning after we moved into our new apartment, my phone exploded with notifications. Mike and Miriam had returned from the funeral, and all hell had broken loose. "Laura, open this door right now." Mike's voice boomed through the intercom. I glanced at Josh, who was pale but resolute. "Should we let them up, Mom?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "No, honey, we're doing this on our terms now." I pressed the intercom button. "Mike, I told you, it's over. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Lawyer?" Miriam's shrill voice cut in. "You ungrateful hussy. After everything we've done for you." I laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done? You mean stealing $500,000 from us?" There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Mike's voice suddenly small. "Laura, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I replied, my voice ice cold. "I know about the offshore account, Mike. I know about everything." More pounding on the lobby door. "You can't keep my grandson from me," Miriam screeched. Josh stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "I'm not your property, Grandma. I chose to come with Mom." Pride swelled in my chest, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Jane. "Laura, turn on the news, now." With shaking hands I flipped on the TV. My jaw dropped as I saw Mike's face plastered across the screen, the headline screaming, "Local businessman implicated in major embezzlement scheme." "Oh my God," I whispered. Josh's eyes widened. "Mom, what's happening?" Before I could answer, there was a commotion downstairs. Through the window, I saw police cars pulling up, officers rushing towards Mike and Miriam. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mike. "What have you done?" I stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part ached for the man I'd once loved. "Mom?" Josh's voice pulled me back. "Did you do this?" I turned to my son, seeing the confusion and hurt in his eyes. "No, honey, I didn't know about the police, but I did tell Jane to look into Dad's finances." Josh nodded slowly, processing. "So what happens now?" As if in answer, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find two stern-faced detectives. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to ask you some questions about your husband's financial activities." For the next 2 hours, Josh and I were interrogated separately. They wanted to know if I was involved, if I had benefited from the embezzled funds. By the time they left, I felt drained and hollow. I found Josh sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. The news was still covering the story, now showing footage of Mike and Miriam being led away in handcuffs. "Oh, Josh," I said, pulling him into a hug. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." He clung to me, his body shaking with silent sobs. "It's not your fault, Mom. They did this, not you." As we sat there, holding each other, my phone buzzed once more. It was Jane. "Laura, I've got more news. The house, it's not just in your name. It's part of a trust set up by Mike's late father for Josh." I gasped. "What?" "Miriam and Mike have been trying to break the trust for months. That's where the money was going. They were paying off judges, trying to get control of Josh's inheritance." The pieces fell into place. Miriam's obsession with Josh, her constant criticism of my parenting, it had never been about family. It had always been about money. As the reality of our situation sank in, I realized this was far from over. We'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. And as I held my son, watching our old life crumble on the TV screen, I knew one thing for certain. I would fight with everything I had to protect Josh and the future that was rightfully his. Miriam and Mike had underestimated me for the last time. Now, they were about to learn just how fierce a mother's love could be. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I took my seat beside Jane. Across the aisle, Mike sat with his lawyer, looking haggard and defeated. Miriam was conspicuously absent, having been denied bail due to flight risk. As the judge entered, a hush fell over the room. This was it, the culmination of months of legal battles, sleepless nights, and emotional turmoil. "All rise," the bailiff called out. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, surveyed the courtroom. "We're here to finalize the divorce proceedings of Laura and Michael Thompson, as well as to address the matter of Joshua Thompson's trust fund. Let's begin." For the next hour, lawyers presented arguments, financial records were scrutinized, and witnesses were called. Through it all, I kept my eyes fixed on Josh, who sat in the gallery, his face a mask of determination. Finally, the judge cleared her throat. "Having reviewed all the evidence, I'm ready to make my ruling." My heart pounded as she continued. "First, regarding the divorce. Given Mr. Thompson's financial misconduct and the evidence of emotional abuse, I'm granting the divorce in favor of Mrs. Thompson." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. "As for the matter of Joshua Thompson's trust fund," the judge continued, "I find the attempts by Mr. Thompson and his mother, Miriam Thompson, to illegally access these funds to be reprehensible." Mike's head dropped into his hands. "The trust will remain intact, with Mrs. Laura Thompson appointed as sole trustee until Joshua reaches the age of 25. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. We'd won. It was over, but as I turned to smile at Josh, the courtroom doors burst open. Miriam, somehow out on bail, stormed in. "This is an outrage," she screeched. "You can't do this to my family." The judge banged her gavel. Mrs. Thompson Sr., you are out of order. Bailiff, remove her immediately. As the bailiff approached, Miriam's eyes locked on mine. In that moment, I saw the full extent of her hatred and desperation. You, she spat, you've ruined everything. Before anyone could react, she lunged at me, her hands clawing at my face. I stumbled backward, shocked by the ferocity of her attack. Mom, Josh yelled, rushing forward. In the chaos that followed, I heard Mike's voice rise above the din. Mother, stop! It's over! The bailiff finally restrained Miriam, who continued to shriek and struggle. As they dragged her away, I saw something I never expected. Mike was crying. Our eyes met across the courtroom. For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd once loved, lost, broken, and finally free from his mother's control. I'm sorry, Laura, he mouthed before being led away by his lawyer. As the courtroom settled, the judge called for order. In light of this incident, I'm adding a restraining order against Miriam Thompson. She is to have no contact with Laura or Joshua Thompson. With a final bang of her gavel, it was truly over. Outside the courthouse, Josh hugged me tight. We did it, Mom. We're free. I held him close, marveling at his strength. Yes, we are, honey. We're free. Jane approached, a wide smile on her face. Congratulations, Laura. You were amazing in there. I shook my head. We were amazing. I couldn't have done this without you, Jane. As we walked away from the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. That night, as Josh and I sat in our new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I realized something profound. You know, Josh, I said, for years I thought I was fighting for our family. But really, I was fighting for us, you and me. We're the family that matters. Josh smiled, his eyes shining. We always were, Mom. We always will be. As I hugged my son, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. Miriam and Mike had tried to break us, but they'd only made us stronger. In the end, love, real, unconditional love, had triumphed over greed and manipulation. And as I looked at Josh, I knew that was the greatest victory of all. The doorbell chimed, sending a jolt of panic through my body. I glanced at the kitchen clock. 5:45 p.m. Selena was early, of course. She always arrived ahead of schedule, probably to catch me unprepared. I wiped my flour-covered hands on my apron and rushed to the front door, plastering on a smile. Emily, dear, Selena cooed as I opened the door. Her eyes swept over me, lingering on my messy apron. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Selena. Happy birthday. I stepped aside, allowing her to glide past me into the foyer. Mitch and Samantha should be home any minute. Selena's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. Oh? I assumed they'd be here helping you prepare for the party. I bit back a retort. Mitch had a late meeting, and Samantha's at her piano lesson. But don't worry, everything's under control. A lie, of course. Nothing was under control. I'd been juggling work calls all day while trying to bake a cake, prepare hors d'oeuvres, and decorate the house for Selena's 60th birthday party. And where was my husband? Nowhere to be found, as usual. I'm sure it is, dear, Selena said, her tone dripping with condescension. She followed me into the kitchen, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. My goodness, what a mess. I gritted my teeth. I was just finishing up the cake. Would you like a glass of wine while we wait for the others? That would be lovely. Selena perched on a bar stool, watching me like a hawk as I poured her a glass of red. You know, Emily, I've been meaning to have a little chat with you. My stomach clenched. Selena's little chats were never good news. Oh, she took a sip of wine, her eyes never leaving mine. I'm concerned about you and Mitch. You seem distant lately. We're fine, I said quickly. Just busy with work and Samantha. Selena set down her glass with a sharp clink. Are you sure about that? Because I happen to know something that might change your mind. My heart raced. What are you talking about? Did you know that Mitch had an affair a few years ago? The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. That's not true. Selena's lips curved into a cruel smile. Oh, but it is. And if you don't want to lose your husband and your daughter, you'd better step up your game. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice shaking. Consider it friendly advice, Selena replied, standing up. Now, where should I put my coat? I pointed numbly toward the closet, my mind reeling. As Selena sashayed away, the front door burst open. Mommy, we're home. Samantha's voice rang out. Mitch appeared in the kitchen doorway, Samantha perched on his hip. Hey, honey, sorry we're late. Traffic was a nightmare. I stared at my husband, searching his face for any sign of guilt or deception. Could Selena be telling the truth? Emily? Mitch frowned. Are you okay? You look pale. I forced a smile. I'm fine, just a little stressed about the party. Mitch set Samantha down and came over to kiss my cheek. Don't worry, I'm here now. What can I do to help? As I rattled off a list of tasks, my mind raced. How could I confront Mitch about Selena's accusation? And if it was true, what would I do? The doorbell chimed again, signaling the arrival of more guests. I took a deep breath, pushing my turmoil aside. I had a party to host, after all. But as I plastered on another fake smile and headed for the door, one thought echoed in my mind. This night was far from over. The morning after Selena's party, I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and a pounding headache. Mitch had already left for work, and Samantha was at school. The house was eerily quiet, allowing Selena's words to echo in my mind. I shook my head, trying to dismiss her accusations. Mitch wouldn't cheat on me. Would he? But as I replayed the past few months in my head, doubt crept in like a poisonous vine. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd become distant both emotionally and physically. My phone buzzed, startling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Gibbs, my father-in-law. Emily, are you free for lunch today? We need to talk. I hesitated before replying. Gibbs had always been kind to me, more of a father than my own had ever been. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. Sure, Gibbs, the usual place at 12:30? An hour later, I found myself sitting across from Gibbs in our favorite diner. He looked troubled, his usually jovial face creased with worry. Emily, my dear, he began, reaching across the table to pat my hand. I couldn't help but notice the tension between you and Mitch last night. Is everything all right? I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. I don't know, Gibbs. Selena said something to me before the party, about Mitch. Gibbs's eyebrows furrowed. What did she say? She told me Mitch had an affair a few years ago. The words tumbled out in a rush, and she threatened that if I didn't step up my game, I'd lose him and Samantha. Gibbs's face darkened. That woman, he muttered, always meddling where she doesn't belong. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Did Mitch really have an affair? Gibbs sighed heavily. Emily, I don't know for certain, but I've had my suspicions for a while now. Mitch has been different lately, distracted, secretive. My heart sank. I've noticed it too. I just didn't want to believe it. Listen to me, Gibbs said, his voice firm. You don't deserve this uncertainty. You're a wonderful woman and an excellent mother. If my son has been foolish enough to jeopardize that, then he doesn't deserve you. Tears welled up in my eyes. What should I do, Gibbs? Let me do some digging, he replied. I have a few contacts who might be able to help us get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, try to act normal around Mitch. That means we don't want to tip him off if there's really something going on. I nodded, grateful for his support. As we finished our lunch, I felt a glimmer of hope. At least I wasn't alone in this. That evening, as I prepared dinner, Mitch came home later than usual. He barely looked at me as he loosened his tie and grabbed a beer from the fridge. How was your day? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Fine, he grunted. Just busy. Big project coming up. I watched him closely, searching for any sign of guilt or deception. But his face remained impassive, giving nothing away. Daddy! Samantha's voice rang out as she bounded into the kitchen. Can we play catch in the backyard? Mitch's face softened as he looked at our daughter. Not tonight, sweetheart. Daddy's tired. Maybe this weekend, okay? Samantha's face fell, and I felt a surge of anger. How dare he neglect our daughter like this? As we sat down to dinner, the tension was palpable. Samantha chattered away, oblivious to the strained silence between her parents. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Gibbs. Found something. Call me when you're alone. My heart raced as I excused myself from the table, claiming a work emergency. Locking myself in the bathroom, I dialed Gibbs's number with shaking hands. Emily, his voice was grave. I'm sorry, but it's true. Mitch had an affair, and I'm afraid it might not be over. The world spun around me as I gripped the sink for support. My worst fears confirmed. I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I stumbled through the next few days in a haze of disbelief and anger. Gibbs's confirmation of Mitch's affair had shattered my world, but I couldn't let it show. Not yet. I had to keep it together for Samantha's sake and to figure out my next move. At work, I found myself staring blankly at spreadsheets, unable to focus. My mind kept replaying every moment with Mitch, searching for clues I might have missed. Emily? My boss's voice snapped me back to reality. Are you all right? You seem distracted lately. I forced a smile. I'm fine, just a bit under the weather. I'll have the Johnson account finished by tomorrow, I promise. He nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. I had to pull myself together before I jeopardized my career, too. That evening, I picked up Samantha from her piano lesson. As we drove home, she chattered excitedly about her upcoming recital. Mommy, will you and Daddy both come to watch me play? My heart clenched. Of course, sweetie. We wouldn't miss it for the world. But would Mitch really be there? Or would he have another late meeting with his mistress? As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Mitch's car already parked. Unusual for him to be home this early. Samantha raced inside while I lingered, steeling myself for another evening of pretending everything was normal. I found Mitch in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot and tired. Hey, he said, his voice rough. Can we talk? My pulse quickened. What about? He took a deep breath. I think we should see a marriage counselor. I stared at him, stunned. Was this his way of confessing? Or just another manipulation? Why? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Mitch ran a hand through his hair. Things haven't been right between us for a while now. I thought maybe talking to someone could help. I wanted to scream, to throw his betrayal in his face. But Samantha's voice drifted down from upstairs, reminding me to stay calm. Okay, I said finally. If that's what you want. Relief flooded his face, and I felt a surge of bitterness. How dare he act like the victim here? Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Gibbs. Need to see you. It's urgent. I have to go out for a bit, I told Mitch. Work emergency. He nodded, already turning back to his drink. I grabbed my keys and headed out, my mind racing. I met Gibbs at a small cafe across town. His face was grim as I sat down. What's wrong? I asked, fear gripping my heart. Gibbs slid a manila envelope across the table. I'm so sorry, Emily, but you need to see this. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Mitch with a beautiful blonde woman, holding hands, kissing, entering a hotel together. The timestamps showed they were taken just last week. It's not over, Gibbs said softly. The affair is still ongoing. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All this time, while I'd been agonizing over a past indiscretion, Mitch had been actively cheating on me. There's more, Gibbs continued. I did some digging into Mitch's finances. He's been siphoning money from your joint account into a separate one. I think he might be planning to leave you. The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the edge of the table, fighting waves of nausea. What do I do now? I whispered. Gibbs reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You fight, Emily. You protect yourself and Samantha. And you show Mitch and Selena that you're not a woman to be trifled with. As I sat there, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, something hardened inside me. The shock and pain gave way to a cold, clear anger. Gibbs was right. It was time to fight, and God help Mitch and Selena when I did. I spent the night tossing and turning. The damning photos of Mitch and his mistress burned into my mind. By morning, I had made my decision. It was time to confront him. As Mitch prepared to leave for work, I blocked the door. We need to talk. Now. His eyes widened at my tone. Emily, I'm going to be late. Sit down, Mitch, I commanded, my voice ice-cold. Surprised by my forcefulness, he complied. I tossed the envelope of photos onto the coffee table. Care to explain these? The color drained from his face as he flipped through the images. Emily, I can explain. Save it, I snapped. I know everything. The affair, the secret bank account. How long were you planning to string me along before leaving? Mitch's shoulders slumped. I never meant for this to happen. It just did. That's your excuse? It just happened. I laughed bitterly. What about our vows, Mitch? What about Samantha? At the mention of our daughter, Mitch flinched. I love Samantha. I love you both. Clearly not enough, I retorted. I want you out of this house, today. Panic flashed across his face. Emily, please, we can work this out. I'll end it with her, I swear. We can go to counseling like I suggested. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed. It was Gibbs. Emily, I'm on my way over with Selena. She needs to face this too. My heart raced. I hadn't planned on confronting Selena yet, but maybe it was better to rip off all the Band-Aids at once. Your parents are on their way over, I told Mitch. I think it's time we all had a little chat. Mitch paled further. My mother? Emily, please, let's handle this privately. The doorbell cut him off. I strode to answer it, leaving Mitch sputtering on the couch. Gibbs entered first, his face grim. Selena followed, looking confused and irritated. What's the meaning of this, Emily? I have a busy day ahead. Her words died as she saw Mitch on the couch, the incriminating photo spread before him. Sit down, Selena, I said, my voice steady. We have a lot to discuss. For the next hour, I laid out everything. The affair, the financial deception, Selena's threat at her birthday party. Gibbs backed me up, providing additional evidence he'd gathered. Selena's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, a calculated calm. Well, she said, smoothing her skirt, these things happen in marriages. I'm sure if Emily had been more attentive. Don't you dare blame this on me, I snarled, surprising even myself with my vehemence. Your son made his choices. And you, I turned to Mitch, you had the audacity to suggest counseling when you were still seeing her? Mitch hung his head. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to end it. Gibbs, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Son, I've never been more disappointed in you, and Selena, your behavior is inexcusable. Selena bristled. Now, Gilbert, let's not be hasty. Enough, I said, standing. This is what's going to happen. Mitch, you're moving out, today. I'll be contacting a lawyer about divorce proceedings. Selena, you're no longer welcome in this house or around Samantha until you can treat me with respect. You can't do this, Selena hissed. We'll fight you for custody. I smiled coldly. Go ahead and try. I have all the evidence I need to ensure that doesn't happen. As they all stared at me in shock, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. Now, I said, I suggest you all leave. I have a daughter to pick up from school and a future to plan. As I watched them file out, Gibbs lingered. I'm proud of you, Emily, he said softly. You're stronger than you know. I nodded, fighting back tears. The road ahead would be tough, but I was ready to face it. For myself and for Samantha. The days following Mitch's departure were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, desperate for any distraction from the implosion of my personal life. But Selena, true to form, wasn't about to let me find peace. It started with incessant phone calls, which I ignored. Then came the barrage of texts, alternating between saccharine concern and thinly veiled threats. I blocked her number, but she always found new ways to reach me. One evening, as I was helping Samantha with her homework, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Selena standing there, a false smile plastered on her face. Emily, dear, she cooed, I thought we could have a little chat. Woman to woman. I stood my ground, blocking the entrance. I have nothing to say to you, Selena. Please leave. Her smile faltered. Now don't be difficult. I'm here to help you see reason, for Samantha's sake. At the mention of my daughter, something snapped inside me. Don't you dare use Samantha as a pawn in your games, I hissed. You've done enough damage. Selena's eyes narrowed. I'm warning you, Emily. If you go through with this divorce, I'll make sure you lose everything, including Samantha. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice dangerously low. It's a promise, she replied, her mask of civility finally dropping. I have connections you can't even imagine. One word from me, and your career will be in shambles. You'll be lucky to get a job flipping burgers. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You really don't know when to quit, do you? I'm not that scared little girl you bullied at your birthday party anymore, Selena. I have evidence of Mitch's affair, proof of financial misconduct, and a rock-solid case for full custody. So go ahead, make your threats. I'm not backing down. Selena's face contorted with rage. She opened her mouth to retort, but I slammed the door in her face, my heart pounding. As I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, I heard Samantha's small voice behind me. Mommy, was that Grandma? Why was she yelling? I turned to find my daughter standing in the hallway, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. In that moment, I realized I couldn't keep shielding her from the truth. She deserved to understand why her world was changing. Kneeling down to her level, I took her hands in mine. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about Daddy and Grandma and why things are going to be different from now on." As I explained the situation in terms she could understand, leaving out the most painful details, I saw a mix of emotions cross her face: sadness, anger, and finally a resolve that mirrored my own. "Are we going to be okay, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small but steady. I pulled her into a tight hug. "Yes, baby. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be strong and brave, and we're going to build a new life together. Just you and me." As I held my daughter, I felt a surge of determination. Selena's threats had only strengthened my resolve. I would fight not just for myself, but for Samantha's future. That night, after tucking Samantha in, I made a decision. It was time to take control of the narrative. I couldn't let Selena spin her web of lies and manipulation any longer. I picked up my phone and dialed Gibbs's number. "I need your help," I said when he answered. "It's time we expose Selena for who she really is, to everyone." Gibbs's voice was grim but supportive. "I'm with you, Emily. What's the plan?" As I outlined my ideas, a sense of purpose filled me. The final showdown with Selena was coming, and this time, I would be the one calling the shots. The day of Selena's birthday party arrived, and with it, a storm of emotions I could barely contain. The Gibbs and I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence and steeling our nerves. As I dressed for the party, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Determination blazed in my eyes, replacing the fear and uncertainty that had haunted me for so long. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" Gibbs asked as we pulled up to the Adams' sprawling estate. I nodded, my jaw set. It's time to end this, once and for all. We entered the house to find it buzzing with guests, all orbiting around Selena like planets around a toxic sun. She spotted us immediately, her eyes narrowing as she glided over. "Emily, darling," she cooed, air kissing my cheek. "How brave of you to show up, and Gilbert, always a pleasure." I forced a smile. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Selena." As the evening wore on, I bided my time watching Selena hold court among her sycophants. Mitch was there too, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my gaze. The tension in the room was palpable, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Finally, as Selena prepared to make her birthday speech, I knew it was time. I caught Gibbs's eye across the room, and he gave me a subtle nod. I stepped forward, glass in hand. "Selena, before you begin, I'd like to say a few words." A hush fell over the crowd. Selena's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered. "Of course, dear. How thoughtful of you." I took a deep breath and addressed the room. "We're here to celebrate Selena's birthday, but I think it's time we celebrated something else, the truth." Murmurs rippled through the guests. Selena's eyes flashed with anger. "Emily, this is hardly the time." "It's exactly the time," I cut her off. "For years, I've watched you manipulate and control everyone around you, Selena. You've threatened me, tried to destroy my marriage, and now you're trying to take my daughter away. But no more." I turned to the stunned crowd. "What you don't know is that Mitch has been having an affair for years, with Selena's full knowledge and approval." Gasps echoed through the room. Mitch stepped forward, his face pale. "Emily, please." "Save it, Mitch." I snapped. "I have proof, text messages, photos, financial records, all showing how you and your mother conspired to deceive me and everyone else." Selena's carefully constructed mask of civility cracked. "You ungrateful little—" "I'm not finished," I interrupted, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "Selena has been embezzling money from her own charity for years. Gibbs, would you care to elaborate?" Gibbs stepped forward, producing a thick folder. "I have documentation here showing years of financial misconduct. Selena has been using the charity as her personal piggy bank, stealing from those who need it most." The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered furiously, some edging towards the door. Selena's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll destroy you, Emily. You'll never work in this town again. I'll make sure you lose everything." I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "No, Selena, you're the one who's lost everything. Your reputation, your son's respect, and any power you thought you had over me." Suddenly, Selena lunged at me, her manicured nails clawing at my face. I stumbled backward, shocked by her ferocity. Gibbs and several guests rushed to pull her off me. "You ruined everything," Selena shrieked, struggling against those restraining her. "This was supposed to be my night." As security guards a hysterical Selena from the room, I found myself face to face with Mitch. His eyes were pleading, filled with remorse and fear. "Emily, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far." I looked at him, the man I had once loved, now a stranger. "It's too late for sorry, Mitch. We're done." As I turned to leave, my heart pounding and adrenaline coursing through my veins, I realized this was far from over. The real battle for my daughter, my future, and my dignity was just beginning. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The aftermath of Selena's birthday party was a whirlwind of chaos. As I stood in my lawyer's office the next day, my head still spinning from the events of the previous night, I knew the real battle was just beginning. "Emily," my lawyer Sarah said gravely, "Selena and Mitch have filed for full custody of Samantha. They're claiming you're mentally unstable and unfit to be a mother." My heart plummeted. "What? How can they do that?" Sarah sighed. "They're using your outburst at the party as evidence. Plus, they've somehow gotten hold of your work records, showing your recent distraction." I felt the room closing in on me. Everything I'd fought for was slipping away. "This can't be happening," I whispered. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Gibbs. "Emily, turn on the news. Now." Sarah flicked on the office TV and my jaw dropped. There, splashed across the screen, were photos of Mitch with his mistress. Recent photos. The headline read, "Prominent Architect's Affair Exposed." "I don't understand," I said, turning to Gibbs, who had just burst into the office. "How did this get out?" Gibbs smiled grimly. "Let's just say I have friends in high places, but that's not all." He produced a USB drive. "This contains records of all of Selena's financial misdeeds, embezzlement, tax evasion, you name it, it's all here." Sarah's eyes widened as she plugged in the drive. This changes everything." As we pored over the documents, my phone rang again. It was Mitch. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Emily, please," he begged, his voice ragged. "Call off the dogs. We can work this out." I felt a surge of anger. "Work what out, Mitch? How you and your mother tried to take my daughter away. How you've been lying to me for years." "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted it to go this far. Mother, she has a way of twisting things. Please, just meet with us for Samantha's sake." I hesitated, looking at Gibbs and Sarah. They nodded encouragingly. "Fine," I said. 1 hour. At the house." When I arrived, Selena and Mitch were already there, that looking haggard and defeated. Selena's usual poise was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered look. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, sitting down. "I have evidence of your affair, Mitch, and your financial crimes, Selena. If you don't drop this custody suit and agree to my terms, I'll take it all public." Selena's eyes flashed. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, my voice steel. "Try me." For a moment, I thought Selena might lunge at me again. But then, something in her seemed to deflate. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Full custody of Samantha," I said. "Mitch can have supervised visitation. Selena, you'll step down from your charity and make full restitution, and you'll both leave us alone." Mitch looked ready to protest, but Selena put a hand on his arm. "We don't have a choice," she muttered. As they signed the agreement Sarah had quickly drawn up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But it wasn't over yet. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I want you both to tell Samantha the truth, about everything. She deserves to know why her family is falling apart." Mitch's face crumpled. "Emily, please. She's just a child." "A child who deserves honesty," I replied firmly. As we called Samantha into the room, my heart raced. This was the moment that would define our future, my daughter's and mine. I watched as confusion, then hurt, then anger flashed across her young face as Mitch stumbled through his confession. When he finished, Samantha turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mommy, can we go home now?" I pulled her into my arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "Yes, baby, we can go home." As we walked out, leaving Mitch and Selena behind, I knew we had a long road ahead. But for the first time in months, I felt hope. We were free, and we were together. Whatever came next, we would face it as a team, just Samantha and me. 6 months after the confrontation with Mitch and Selena, I stood in our new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Samantha was at school, and I had taken the day off to finish settling us in. As I hung a family photo, just Samantha and me now, I felt a bittersweet pang. So much had changed, but we were finally free. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. I opened it to find Gibbs standing there, a warm smile on his face. "Just thought I'd check in on you two," he said, stepping inside. "How's the unpacking going?" I sighed, gesturing at the chaos around us. "Slowly but surely. It's strange, starting over like this." Gibbs nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "You're doing amazingly, Emily. I'm proud of you." As we sat down for coffee, Gibbs updated me on the aftermath of our confrontation. Selena had been forced to step down from her charity, the scandal too much for the board to ignore. Mitch had lost several high-profile clients, his reputation in tatters. "And how are you holding up?" I asked Gibbs, knowing how painful it must be to distance himself from his son and wife. He sighed heavily. "It's not easy, but I know I made the right choice. Family is about more than blood, Emily. It's about loyalty, trust, and doing what's right." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mitch. "Can we talk? I miss Samantha." I showed the message to Gibbs, my hands shaking slightly. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Part of me wants to keep him away forever, but I know Samantha needs her father." Gibbs placed a comforting hand on my arm. "You'll figure it out, Emily. You always do." As Gibbs left, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had faced down Selena, stood up to Mitch, and rebuilt my life from the ground up. I could handle this, too. That evening, as Samantha and I sat down to dinner, I broached the subject gently. "Sweetie, your dad wants to see you. How do you feel about that?" Samantha pushed her peas around her plate, her brow furrowed in thought. "Will Grandma Selena be there?" "No, honey. Just your dad." She nodded slowly. "Oh, but can you come too, Mommy?" I felt a lump form in my throat. "Of course, baby. Always." As I tucked Samantha into bed that night, I marveled at her resilience. Despite everything, she still found reasons to smile, to hope. I knew then that we would be okay. The next morning, I woke up early, a sense of calm settling over me. I had an important meeting at work, my first big presentation since the divorce. As I dressed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Gone was the uncertain, fearful woman I had been just months ago. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid to face whatever life threw her way. At work, I nailed the presentation. My boss pulled me aside afterward, a proud smile on his face. "Emily, I don't know what's changed, but whatever it is, keep it up. You're on track for that promotion we discussed." As I drove to pick up Samantha from school, I felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me. We had weathered the storm, Samantha and I, and come out stronger on the other side. Samantha bounded into the car, her face alight with excitement. "Mommy, I got the lead in the school play." I hugged her tightly, my heart swelling with pride and love. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. We'll have to celebrate." As we drove home, Samantha chattering happily beside me, I realized that this moment of simple joy was what I had been fighting for all along. Not the big house or the perfect family image, but the freedom to be ourselves, to love and support each other without manipulation or deceit. That night, as I sat on our small balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I felt truly at peace for the first time in years. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, I knew. There would be challenges, co-parenting with Mitch, helping Samantha navigate her new reality, continuing to prove myself at work. But I was ready for it all. Because now I knew my own strength, and I had the unconditional love of my daughter to sustain me. Whatever came next, we would face it together with resilience, grace, and the unshakable bond between a mother and her child. As I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air, I smiled. This wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a new, better chapter. The shattering of glass echoed through the kitchen, followed by Harry's exasperated sigh. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before turning to face the mess. It was the third plate this week. "Maggie, where's the dustpan?" Harry called out, not bothering to look for it himself. "Right where it always is, dear." "Under the sink," I replied, my voice strained with forced patience. As I watched him fumble with the broom, I couldn't help but wonder when my husband had become so helpless. "You know, if you'd just let me organize the cabinets my way, this wouldn't happen," he grumbled, sweeping the shards into a pile. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind him that his way involved shoving everything into random drawers. Instead, I focused on finishing the dishes, scrubbing perhaps a bit harder than necessary. "Oh, by the way," Harry said, dumping the broken plate into the trash, "Mom called earlier. She wants us over for dinner tomorrow night." My hands froze mid-scrub. "Tomorrow? But we have plans, remember? The Johnsons invited us for their barbecue." Harry shrugged, already heading for the living room. "We can do that another time. You know how Mom gets when we cancel." I did know. All too well. Ella, my mother-in-law, had a knack for guilt-tripping that would make a Catholic nun envious. But this was the third time this month we'd changed our plans to accommodate her whims. "Harry," I called out, following him, "don't you think it's time we set some boundaries with your mother?" He looked at me as if I'd suggested we move to Mars. "Boundaries? With Mom? Come on, Maggie. Don't be ridiculous. She's just lonely since Dad passed. It's been 5 years, Harry, and she has a busier social life than we do." Harry's face clouded over. "Look, I don't want to argue about this. We're going to Mom's tomorrow, end of discussion." I felt something snap inside me. End of discussion? When did you become the dictator of this household? When did you become so selfish? He shot back. "She's my mother, Maggie. She needs us." "And what about what I need?" I didn't realize I was shouting until I saw Harry flinch. "What about our marriage? When was the last time we did something just the two of us?" Harry's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression softening. "I've got to take this. It's work." As he walked away, already engrossed in his call, I sank onto the couch, feeling deflated. This wasn't the man I'd married 15 years ago. That Harry had been ambitious, attentive, and most importantly, my partner. This Harry, I wasn't sure who he was anymore. My own phone chimed with a text. It was from Lily, my sister-in-law. "SOS. Need to talk. Can you meet me at Joe's Diner in 20? I hesitated, glancing towards the study where I could hear Harry's muffled voice. Making a split-second decision, I grabbed my keys. "I'm going out," I called to Harry. No response, of course. The drive to Joe's was a blur of streetlights and conflicting emotions. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Lily already at our usual booth, her face pale and drawn. "Lily, what's wrong?" I slid in across from her, noting the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "It's Sam. And Ella. I overheard them talking. Maggie, I think they're plotting something against me." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Lily opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the diner's door chimed. We both looked up to see Harry walk in, his face a mask of fury as he spotted us. "Maggie? What the hell is going on here?" As Harry stormed towards our table, I realized that the quiet discontent in my marriage was about to erupt into something I wasn't sure I was prepared to face. Harry's thunderous expression sent a chill down my spine as he approached our booth. Lily shrank back, her eyes darting between us. "What's going on here?" Harry demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. "I'm having coffee with my sister-in-law. Is that a crime now?" "Don't play games, Maggie. You snuck out without telling me." "I told you I was leaving. It's not my fault you were too busy with your work call to notice." Harry's jaw clenched. "We'll discuss this at home. Come on, let's go." I glanced at Lily, who looked on the verge of tears. "No, Harry. Lily needs me right now." "Oh, for God's sake," he muttered. "What's wrong now, Lily? Another imaginary slight from Mom." Lily flinched as if she'd been slapped. I felt my anger rising. "That's enough. Harry, go home. I'll be there when I'm done here." For a moment I thought he might argue further, but then his phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it, his expression changing. "Fine, don't be late. We have dinner at Mom's tomorrow, remember?" As Harry stormed out, I turned back to Lily. "I'm so sorry about that. Now, what were you saying about Ella and Sam?" Lily's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. "I overheard them talking in the study last night. They were discussing ways to deal with me. Ella said I was becoming a problem, that I was turning Sam against her." I felt a surge of protective anger. "What did Sam say?" "He agreed with her," Lily's voice broke. "He said maybe it was time to consider other options, whatever that means." My mind raced. "Have you confronted Sam about this?" Lily shook her head. "I'm scared, Maggie. You know what Ella's capable of. Remember what happened to Janet?" I winced at the memory. Janet had been Sam's previous girlfriend before Lily. She'd stood up to Ella once too often, and suddenly found herself the subject of vicious rumors that ruined her reputation in town. She'd moved away soon after. "We need to do something." I said, reaching across the table to squeeze Lily's hand. This can't go on. Just then, the diner's door chimed again. We both looked up to see Ella herself sweep in, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a stark contrast to our disheveled appearances. Well, well, Ella said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. What a cozy little meeting. Planning another way to disappoint my boys, are we? I felt Lily stiffen beside me. Hello, Ella, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What brings you here? Ella's eyes narrowed. I was on my way home from bridge club when I saw your car, Maggie. Imagine my surprise when I realized you were here instead of at home with my Harry. You know how he hates to eat alone. Harry's a grown man, Ella. I'm sure he can manage dinner on his own for one night. Ella's smile turned predatory. Oh, I'm not worried about Harry. I'm more concerned about you, dear. It's not good for a wife to neglect her duties so frequently. I felt a retort building in my throat, but Lily spoke up first. We were just leaving, Ella. No need to worry about us. Ella's gaze swiveled to Lily, and I saw a flash of something cold in her eyes. Of course, dear. I'm sure Sam is wondering where you've run off to as well. You know how he worries. As Ella sauntered away to order her coffee, Lily and I exchanged glances. The weight of unspoken fears hung between us. We can't let her win, I whispered fiercely. Whatever she's planning, we need to be ready. Lily nodded, a spark of determination finally lighting her eyes. You're right. It's time we stopped being victims and started fighting back. As we left the diner, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping onto a battlefield. But for the first time in years, I felt ready for the fight. The next morning I woke to an empty bed and the sound of hushed voices from downstairs. Creeping down the stairs, I recognized Harry's low murmur and Ella's sharp tones. My stomach clenched as I strained to hear their conversation. She's becoming a problem, Harry, Ella hissed. You need to get her under control. Mom, please. Maggie's just going through a phase. She'll come around. I bit back a bitter laugh. A phase? Is that what he thought this was? She's poisoning Lily against us, Ella continued. If we're not careful, they'll ruin everything we've worked for. My blood ran cold. What were they talking about? What had they worked for? Before I could hear Harry's response, the front door opened, and Sam's voice joined the mix. I retreated upstairs, my mind racing. Later that afternoon, I met Lily at the park, away from prying eyes and ears. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Maggie, I can't take it anymore, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Last night, Sam, I felt a surge of protective anger. Did he hurt you? Lily shook her head. Not physically, but he told me I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. He said if I didn't stop causing trouble, he'd have to take action. That sounds like a threat, I said, my jaw clenching. It gets worse, Lily continued. I found these in his desk drawer. She handed me a stack of papers. As I flipped through them, my heart sank. Bank statements, property deeds, all in Sam's name alone. He's been hiding assets, I muttered. Lily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I think he's planning to leave me, Maggie, and if he does, I'll have nothing. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We won't let that happen. We'll fight back together. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Harry. Where are you? Mom's waiting for us. I'd completely forgotten about the dinner at Ella's. I have to go, I told Lily, but this isn't over. We'll figure something out. When I arrived at Ella's house, the tension was palpable. Harry shot me a disapproving look as I slipped into my seat at the dining table. Nice of you to join us, dear, Ella said, her smile not reaching her eyes. We were just discussing the future of the family business. I blinked in surprise. I didn't know there was a family business. Sam chuckled. Oh, Maggie, always the last to know, aren't you? I felt a flash of anger. Maybe if someone bothered to tell me things, I wouldn't be. Now, Ella interjected smoothly. Let's not bicker. We have important matters to discuss. Harry, Sam, why don't you tell Maggie about our plans? As Harry and Sam launched into an explanation about some property development scheme, my mind whirled. This was what they'd been working on? And they'd kept me in the dark all this time? Of course, Ella continued, we'll need everyone's cooperation, including Lily's. I stiffened. What do you mean? Ella's smile turned predatory. Well, we'll need to use some of the properties in her name. For tax purposes, you understand. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The hidden assets, the whispered conversations, the threats against Lily. They were planning to use her, then discard her. No, I said, my voice ringing out in the sudden silence. Absolutely not. Harry's face darkened. Maggie, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I snapped. You're all planning to rob Lily blind. Well, it's not going to happen, not while I'm around. As I stood to leave, Ella's voice cut through the air like a whip. Sit down, Maggie. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I met her gaze, feeling a surge of defiance. No, Ella, you have no idea what you're dealing with. This ends now. As I stormed out of the house, I could feel the weight of their stares on my back. I knew I'd just declared war, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. The days following my confrontation at Ella's house were a blur of tense silences and heated arguments. Harry barely spoke to me, spending most of his time on hushed phone calls or locked away in his study. I knew I was walking a dangerous line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at stake. One evening, as I was sorting through old papers in our bedroom, I stumbled upon a folder I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a stack of legal documents. As I scanned the pages, my blood ran cold. "Harry!" I shouted, storming downstairs with the folder clutched to my chest. "What the hell is this?" He looked up from his laptop, his face paling as he saw what I was holding. "Maggie, I can explain." "Explain?" I threw the papers onto the coffee table. "Explain how you've been secretly transferring our assets into accounts I can't access. Explain how you've been funneling money into this so-called family business without my knowledge or consent." Harry stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "It's not what you think. We're just protecting our interests." "Our interests?" I laughed bitterly. "Or your mother's." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Help. Sam's gone crazy. He's threatening to take everything." My heart raced. "I have to go," I told Harry, already grabbing my keys. "Where are you going?" he demanded, following me to the door. I whirled to face him. "To help your brother's wife, since apparently none of you care about her well-being." I arrived at Lily's house to find her sitting on the front steps, her face buried in her hands. When she looked up, I saw a bruise forming on her cheek. "Oh, Lily," I breathed, pulling her into a hug. "What happened?" Through her tears, she told me how Sam had come home in a rage, accusing her of conspiring against the family. When she'd confronted him about the hidden assets, he'd lost control. He said if I didn't sign over everything to him, he'd make sure I ended up with nothing, she sobbed. "Maggie, I'm scared. I don't know what to do." I held her tightly, my mind racing. "We need to get you out of here. Pack a bag. You're coming with me." As Lily gathered her things, I made a series of phone calls. First to a lawyer friend who owed me a favor, then to a women's shelter I'd volunteered at years ago. Finally, to my sister across state lines. By the time Sam's car pulled into the driveway, we were ready to leave. He stumbled out, his face contorted with anger when he saw us. "Where do you think you're going?" he slurred, blocking our path to my car. I stepped in front of Lily, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Move, Sam. You don't want to do anything you'll regret." He lunged forward, but I was ready. The self-defense classes I'd taken after college finally paid off as I sidestepped his clumsy attack, using his momentum to send him sprawling. "Let's go," I told Lily, ushering her into the car. As we drove away, I could see Sam shouting and gesticulating in the rearview mirror. My phone buzzed incessantly. Harry, no doubt, having been alerted by his brother. "What now?" Lily asked, her voice small and scared. I took a deep breath, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Now we fight back. No more playing nice, no more being the obedient wives they expect us to be. It's time to show Ella and her boys exactly what we're capable of." As we crossed the city limits, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I knew that by driving away, I was leaving behind the life I'd known for the past 15 years. But looking at Lily's determined face beside me, I also knew I was driving towards something far more important: freedom, justice, and the chance to reclaim our lives. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the war had begun, and we were ready for battle. The safe house my sister had arranged for us was small but secure. As days turned into weeks, Lily and I settled into a routine, strategizing our next moves and supporting each other through the emotional turmoil. We'd both filed for divorce, and the legal battle was just beginning. One afternoon, as we pored over financial documents, my phone rang. It was Harry. "Maggie, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Come home, we can work this out." I felt a pang in my chest, but steeled myself. "There's nothing to work out, Harry. You made your choice." "Mom's sick," he blurted out. She needs us, all of us." I froze, my mind racing. Was this another manipulation, or was Ella truly ill? Before I could respond, I heard Ella's voice in the background. "Tell her I need one of my daughters-in-law to move in and take care of me. It's the least they can do after tearing this family apart." My blood boiled. Even now, Ella was trying to control us. "Put her on the phone," I demanded. "Maggie, dear," Ella's saccharine voice oozed through the speaker. "I hope you've come to your senses. This little rebellion of yours has gone on long enough." "Rebellion?" I scoffed. "Is that what you call standing up for ourselves?" "Don't be dramatic," Ella chided. "Now I expect either you or Lily to be here by tomorrow. I need round-the-clock care, and who better than family?" I glanced at Lily, who was shaking her head vehemently. "That's not going to happen, Ella," I said firmly. "Oh." Her tone turned icy. "Well, perhaps you should consider the consequences of your refusal. I'd hate for certain information to come to light." My heart raced. "What are you talking about?" "Let's just say I know things about both you and Lily that you'd rather keep private. Your choice, dear." The line went dead, leaving me stunned. "What is it?" Lily asked, her face pale. "What did she say?" I relayed the conversation, watching Lily's expression shift from fear to anger. "She's bluffing," Lily insisted. "She can't know anything that bad." But doubt gnawed at me. What if Ella did have something on us? Could we risk calling her bluff? Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number containing a video file. With trembling fingers, I pressed play. The grainy footage showed me, years ago, in a heated argument with my former boss. I watched horror as my past self shoved him, causing him to stumble back against his desk. "Oh, God," I whispered. I'd forgotten about that. Lily peered at the screen. "What is it?" "It was right before I quit my last job," I explained. He'd been harassing me for months. That day, he tried to... I just snapped. I never reported it because I was afraid no one would believe me. Another text came through. "Imagine if this got out. Assault charges could complicate your divorce, couldn't they?" Lily's phone chimed next. She gasped as she read the message. "They know about the money I've been sending my sister," she said, her voice shaking. "The money from the joint account with Sam. They're threatening to accuse me of embezzlement." We sat in stunned silence, the weight of Ella's threats hanging over us. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, her voice small. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. We'd come so far, fought so hard. Could we really let Ella win now? But as I looked at Lily, saw the fear and determination in her eyes, I knew we couldn't back down. We'd weathered too much to give up now. "We fight," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We call her bluff, and we fight back harder than ever. No more running, no more hiding. It's time to take the battle to them." Lily nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "Together?" I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Together. They have no idea what we're capable of." As we began to formulate our plan, I felt a surge of resolve. Ella thought she had the upper hand, but she'd underestimated us for the last time. The real war was just beginning, and we were ready to win. The morning after Ella's threats, I woke to find Lily pacing our small living room, her face ashen. "Maggie," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something I've been hiding." My heart raced as I sat up, bracing myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. "What is it, Lily?" She collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "Sam's been having an affair," she choked out, "for years. And Ella's been covering for him." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for a while, but I found proof last month," Lily confessed. "Emails, hotel receipts. And then I overheard Ella talking to Sam about keeping it quiet. She said it was for the good of the family." Rage boiled inside me. "That manipulative witch," I seethed. "And Sam? How could he do this to you?" Lily's sobs intensified. "There's more," she whispered. "The woman he's been seeing, she's pregnant." The room spun around me as the full weight of Lily's revelation sank in. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about a child, an innocent life caught in the crossfire of our family's dysfunction. We need to confront them, I said, my voice hard with determination. All of them. No more hiding, no more secrets. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. But how? They'll just deny everything. A plan began to form in my mind. We gather evidence, everything we can find, and then we hit them where it hurts, their precious family business. We spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity. I called in favors from old colleagues, dug through financial records, and pieced together a damning picture of fraud and deceit that went far beyond Sam's affair. As we prepared to confront our husbands and Ella, my phone buzzed with a text from Harry. "We need to talk. Meet me at the park in an hour." Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, Harry was pacing nervously by the fountain. "Maggie," he said, his voice strained, "I know things have been bad between us, but I need you to come home. Mom's condition is getting worse, and the business... We're in trouble. Big trouble." I steeled myself against the flicker of sympathy I felt. "What kind of trouble, Harry?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Financial irregularities. The auditors are asking questions. If we don't sort this out, we could lose everything." For a moment, I was tempted to tell him everything I knew, to offer help. But then I remembered Lily's tears, Ella's threats, the years of manipulation. "I'm sorry, Harry," I said, my voice steady, "but I can't help you, not anymore." His face darkened. "You don't understand. If this gets out, it won't just be us who suffer. Think about the employees, their families." "Don't you dare try to guilt me," I snapped. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences." As I turned to leave, Harry grabbed my arm. "Maggie, please. I love you." I wrenched my arm free, tears stinging my eyes. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have let your mother control our lives. You wouldn't have lied to me for years." "What are you talking about?" Harry's face paled. "I know everything, Harry. About the business, about Sam's affair. And I know you've been hiding things from me, too." Harry's expression shifted from confusion to fear. "Maggie, whatever you think you know." "Save it," I cut him off. "Lily and I are done being your family's doormats. We're taking control of our lives, and if that means bringing down this house of cards you've built, so be it." As I walked away, leaving Harry stunned and silent, my phone buzzed again. It was Lily. "Maggie," she gasped, her voice thick with tears. "I just got a call from the hospital. It's Ella. She's had a heart attack." I froze, the weight of everything crashing down on me. In that moment, I realized we'd reached the point of no return. Whatever happened next would change our lives forever. "I'm on my way," I told Lily, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's time to end this, once and for all." The hospital corridor seemed endless as Lily and I rushed towards Ella's room. My mind raced with conflicting emotions. Concern for a woman I'd once considered family, anger at her manipulations, and fear of what awaited us. As we rounded the corner, we saw Harry and Sam huddled outside Ella's room, their faces drawn with worry. They looked up as we approached, surprise and relief flickering across their features. "Maggie, Lily," Harry said, his voice hoarse. "You came." Before I could respond, a nurse emerged from Ella's room. "She's asking for you all," she said softly. We filed into the room, the tension palpable. Ella lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. But as her eyes met mine, I saw a flash of the old steel. "Well," she rasped, "I suppose it took me nearly dying to bring this family back together." I felt Lily stiffen beside me. "We're here out of concern, Ella," I said carefully. "But don't think for a moment that this changes anything." Ella's lips curved into a weak smile. "Always the fighter, aren't you, Maggie? But there are things you don't know. Things that..." Suddenly, Lily stepped forward, her face flushed. "No more secrets," she said, her voice trembling. "No more lies. I know about Sam's affair, Ella. I know you've been covering for him." The room fell silent. Sam's face drained of color while Harry looked between us in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Harry demanded. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's not just Sam, Harry. We know about the financial irregularities in the business. We know about the fraud." Harry's eyes widened in shock. "How did you?" "That's enough." Ella's voice cracked like a whip, startling us all. She struggled to sit up, her eyes blazing. "You ungrateful girls have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family." "Sacrificed?" I scoffed. "You've manipulated and lied to us for years." As the accusations flew, the room descended into chaos. Sam and Harry tried to defend themselves while Ella alternated between pleas for understanding and threats. In the midst of the turmoil, Lily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then gasped. "Maggie," she whispered, showing me the screen. It was an email from our lawyer. Attached were documents proving not only Sam's infidelity, but also Harry's. My world tilted on its axis as I scanned the evidence. Hotel receipts, intimate messages, even photos. I felt as if I'd been plunged into icy water. All this time, while I'd been fighting to save my marriage, Harry had been betraying me too. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice breaking as I turned to Harry. His face crumpled. "Maggie, I can explain, but I was beyond explanations. Years of pent-up anger, hurt, and betrayal surged through me. "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "No more explanations. No more chances. Lily and I are done." Ella struggled to sit up, her face contorted with rage. "You can't just walk away. Think of the scandal, the shame." "The only shame here is what you've done to this family," Lily said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I turned to Lily, seeing my own pain and determination reflected in her face. "We're leaving," I said, "for good this time." As we walked towards the door, Sam called out, "You'll never survive without us. You have nothing." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "We have each other," I said, not bothering to look back. "And that's more than enough." With that, Lily and I stepped out of the room, leaving behind the shattered remains of our old lives. As the door closed on the sounds of Ella's angry shouts and our husband's pleas, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. "What now?" Lily asked, her voice small but determined. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from our shared resolve. "Now, we start over, on our own terms." As we walked out of the hospital into the bright sunlight, I knew the hardest part of our journey was still ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Whatever challenges awaited us, Lily and I would face them together, stronger than ever. 2 weeks after our hospital confrontation, Lily and I stood outside Ella's sprawling mansion, our hearts pounding. We'd received a summons, a final attempt, no doubt, to manipulate us back into the fold. But this time we were ready. "Are you sure about this?" Lily whispered, her hand trembling in mine. I squeezed her fingers reassuringly. "Absolutely. It's time to end this once and for all." As we entered, the tension in the air was palpable. Harry, Sam, and Ella sat in the living room, their faces a mix of anger, fear, and desperation. Ella, looking frail but determined, spoke first. "Girls, I'm glad you've come to your senses. Now let's discuss how we can move past this unpleasantness." I felt a surge of anger at her dismissive tone. "There's nothing to discuss, Ella. We're here to tell you that we're filing for divorce." The room erupted into chaos. Sam leapt to his feet, his face red with rage. "You can't do this. Think of the scandal, the shame." Harry, pale and shaken, pleaded, "Maggie, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything." But it was Ella's reaction that surprised me most. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "You foolish girls," she spat. "You think you can just walk away? I built this family, this empire. I won't let you destroy it." Lily stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "You're the one who destroyed it, Ella. With your lies, your manipulations. We're just finally breaking free." As accusations flew and tempers flared, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I realized that this moment, this confrontation, was what we'd been building towards for years. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not here to argue. We're here to tell you that it's over. We have evidence of your infidelities, your financial fraud. If you try to fight us on this, we'll take it all public." The color drained from their faces as the full impact of our words sank in. Harry slumped in his chair, defeated. Sam paced like a caged animal. But Ella's eyes blazed with a fury I'd never seen before. "You ungrateful little—" she began, rising from her chair. But before she could finish, Lily interrupted, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "No, Ella, we're not ungrateful. We're survivors. And we're done letting you control our lives." In that moment, looking at Lily's determined face, I felt a surge of pride and love for my sister-in-law. We'd been through hell together, and we'd come out stronger. "This is your last chance," I said, addressing all three of them. "Accept the divorce terms we've proposed, or we'll see you in court. And trust me, you don't want that." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Harry spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from us?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. We want our freedom, a fair division of assets, and your word that you'll never try to contact us again. Sam opened his mouth to argue, but Ella held up a hand, silencing him. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the formidable woman she once was, the woman who had held this family in her iron grip for so long. "You've won," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "Take what you want and go." As Lily and I turned to leave, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Years of resentment, fear, and anger began to melt away, replaced by a sense of possibility. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Lily turned to me, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "We're free." I pulled her into a tight hug, feeling my own eyes well up. "Yes, we are, and we did it together." As we walked away from the house that had been our prison for so long, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it was ours to choose. "So," Lily said, a small smile playing on her lips. "What now?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now we live, Lily. On our own terms, by our own rules, the world is waiting for us." Hand in hand, we walked towards our new future, leaving behind the shadows of our past. We had faced our demons, confronted our fears, and emerged victorious. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them. Together, as sisters, as survivors, as women who had reclaimed their power and their lives. The end was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.